Hey, I'm Gina. Welcome to the Oh, There's More podcast, a space to get real and go deep. No more just checking the boxes and going through the motions. It's time to live out the beautiful life that God has written for you. On today's episode, we'll talk about what lamenting actually is and how it can play a big role in our journey to healing. We've talked about grief, but something else that we struggle with doing is lamenting. And in case you're not familiar with what that word is, dictionary.com labels it as a verb, so an action word. And the definition is expressing one's deep grief or expressing regret or disappointment over something considered unsatisfactory, unreasonable, or unfair. And what's funny is one of the synonyms for lamenting is to complain about. And that right there, I'm sure, is something that triggers some of you. And I say that with all the love in my heart because it was actually something that I've wrestled with in the recent past. I don't think I'd be far off if I said I used to live a life of complaining. I could find something wrong everywhere I went and in literally every situation. When I gave my life to God, it was something that I realized was an issue, and there's been a lot of healing in that area, not to hide my complaining, but for my view of things to be transformed. And gosh, there's even a Bible verse, Philippians 2:14, that says, do everything without grumbling and complaining. So if I am a quote-unquote good Christian, then that means I'm not going to complain. I'm always going to find a reason to be grateful. God is faithful. God is good. It could be so much worse. We can spend a ton of time filling in the blanks with things that we've either heard or thought, right? And it was actually my counselor that pointed out the fact that when we would talk about hard things, I would always wrap up the sentence with this pretty bow and say one of those phrases. I'd mention how it could be worse, or how I'm blessed even in the hard circumstances, or that I'm thankful even for those hard things. I wanted to wrap up every complaint or every difficulty with something good. She even took me to that Bible verse, in fact, because I had said, well, the Bible tells us that we're not supposed to do things grumbling and complaining. So she pulled out her Bible and proceeded to read that verse, and then she went over to the book of Lamentations and just read one of them to me out loud. And what's interesting is that there's actually a blueprint, if you will, for lamenting within that book, as well as some of the Psalms. If you go read them for yourself, you'll see, oh wow, this definitely sounds like complaining to me. And that shouldn't have come as a surprise to me, but there are so many things that are hidden in plain sight, so to speak, and this was one of them. God has given us a way to process through these places of grief, regret, disappointment, dashed hopes and dreams. And if He's given us a way to do that, then it means that we're supposed to do it. Not in a rule-based way, but it's given to us as a gift so that we can find healing and we don't continue to walk through this life with new unhealed wounds that hang around and fester. There are so many places and so many things where we're going to continue to get hurt and disappointed and even let down. The thing about this healing journey is that we are addressing the really deep stuff, the root of things, so that we can have a better foundation as we continue forward. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to face grief and wounds in the future. It just simply means that now we'll be equipped and we'll know how to better handle it and work through it. The true purpose behind lamenting isn't just to complain. It's to get closer to God, and in order to do that, we have to be honest with Him. Maybe for you, getting honest with God is something that you have felt like you couldn't do. Telling God, I'm really mad right now, may make you feel like, oh my goodness, I could never say that to God. But I just want to propose something to you that has really helped me in the process. Just because I don't say it out loud or journal it in a notebook or pray it in a silent prayer doesn't mean that it isn't there, and it doesn't mean that God doesn't already know. Yeah, I'm going to let that sink in for just a second. God already knows. In fact, He knows those things that we're thinking and feeling even better than we do, sometimes before we do, including those thoughts of being angry or disappointed how things have turned out. God already knows. So keeping them from God isn't actually a thing. It's more like pretending, and the only one who we're attempting to fool is ourselves. So you can start to see how this all just doesn't work too well, right? Just like God knows our hearts and our thoughts, so does our body. Just because we don't address them or face them and process them does not make them non-existent. It simply makes them like the elephant in the room. I hope that doesn't date me too much, but I don't know of a new saying for that one, ladies. And that can lead to not only heart issues and issues with our thinking, but it can also lead to health issues. Because our body is in this hyper alert state, right? That fight or flight. And our cortisol levels are elevated for extended periods of time. This isn't natural, and it leads to consequences in our bodies and a ripple effect into every facet of our lives. I guess because God thought it was time to address this part of my life, He showed up to get my attention. And this is just kind of how things go for me. So I went to that appointment with my counselor, and she brought up lamenting. She wanted to make sure I was truly acknowledging the difficulty of situations in the right way. The very next day, in a group that I'm in for my business, someone mentioned how God was teaching her how to lament, and she'd found a great book. The funny thing is that God said that word to me probably a week prior, and I wrote it down in my journal, as I often do when I keep hearing or seeing something. There are these themes that will start to show up, whether it's a topic or a Bible verse or even just a word. And it's not always clear right away if it's just for me or if it's something He wants me to pray about or if it's even to share with others. So I didn't connect the dots until this moment when someone else literally said lament. It's not a word that you just walk around hearing all day, at least I don't, especially not in entrepreneurial circles. But God will reach us wherever He wants to, and that's such a beautiful thing. So He was telling me that I needed to learn what lamenting was and how to do it. I asked this person for the name of the book, and it just so happened to be free on Audible. So I added it to my library, and I started listening the next time I had a bit of a commute. I got 2 chapters in, and I had to stop because it's one of those books with so much gold that I needed to highlight everything in a physical book. Yes, I'm someone who writes some books. Don't come for me. And I can do an Audible book if it's something that I don't really need to ponder and let soak in. But this was packed with so much goodness that I had to stop listening and get a physical copy. So I'm sure that you're on the edge of your seat wanting to know what book it is, right? It's called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, Discovering the Grace of Lament. And here is the summary. Lament is how you live between the poles of a hard life and trusting God's goodness. Lament is how we bring our sorrow to God, but it is a neglected dimension of the Christian life for many Christians today. We need to recover the practice of honest spiritual struggle that gives us permission to vocalize our pain and wrestle with our sorrow. Whew, that is powerful. Lament avoids trite answers and quick solutions, progressively moving us toward deeper worship and trust. Exploring how the Bible, through the Psalms of Lament and the Book of Lamentations, gives voice to our pain. This book invites us to grieve, struggle, and tap into the rich reservoir of grace and mercy God offers in the darkest moments of our lives. I'm not joking when I say that this is powerful. It's no wonder it's something almost hidden in plain sight from us. and we're made to feel shame about it if we aren't just all sunshine and rainbows. I can't even put into words the way that lamenting and grieving has changed my life. Right now, I'm just seeing this backpack that is so heavy because every time something happens, the person picks it up, reaches around, and stuffs it in that backpack. They don't feel like they have permission to be honest about how they feel, let alone process through it, and so it becomes another heavy stone that they carry around. Now, imagine if that same person were to instead look at that heavy stone and yell at it, or ugly cry tears and snot all over it, or smash it, tell it how disappointed they were, whatever they were feeling led to do and say they did and said, and then the stone got set back down and they kept walking. This is the place that I pray that every one of us is able to get to, that we can acknowledge, identify, and process through the tough things so that they don't become heavy burdens that we carry around with us every single day. As we go through this process, it leads to a deeper trust and relationship with God. Have you ever had those friendships that just stand the test of time? They're the ones that you've had conflict in and came out on the other side stronger together. They're the ones where you can be yourself and be honest, even if what you're sharing is ugly and hard. You can spew what you're thinking, and when it's off, that person will help point you back to true north. So, in another hidden in plain sight aha moment, of course, lament would bring us closer to God and both strengthen and deepen that relationship. When that foundation is built up, there's a ripple effect into every other part of our lives. So will you try lamenting? Whether that means you write out your own lamentation about something you're struggling with, or you get Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. There's a link on my resources page that will take you directly to it, so you can discover the blueprint that God laid out for us in His Word. Try it and just see what happens. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share it with your people. You can go to my website, ginapeak.com, to find extra resources and info. Until next time,